Okay, so who are we? Why are we here? So I'm going to talk to an audience where you're going to be surprised by my first statement, and that is that I know nothing about gaming, I know nothing about esports, and I really don't care a whole lot about gaming and esports. So forgive me, which is kind of an odd thing to say to an audience like this. But what I do care about is I represent a family and a family foundation that deeply cares about children and deeply cares about especially people of color and girls, and how to give them an opportunity so that the zip code they're born into doesn't dictate the future of their life. That's what our passion is about, and that's what we do. I represent Henry and Susan Samueli. Henry's the founder of a company called Broadcom. Years and years ago, when he was a youngster, his project that sparked his life was putting together a Heath kit when he was in 7th grade, and he goes, oh my God, how does this work? What do I do to pursue what now is my passion? What we see in esports is the opportunity to go where kids are today, to find their passion, and to create an opportunity for them to be able to learn, grow, and thrive. It's not so much just about the game and the game itself, but it's the entire ecosystem of what the industry and the field has to offer. So I went about 9 months ago to UCI Esports for the purpose of looking to see whether the family wanted to invest in and build a professional esports team. The family I represent also owns the Anaheim Ducks hockey team. So the idea of going into esports could have been something they wanted to do. After looking at it, and when Henry Samueli asked me what I thought, I said, well, you know, there's a possibility here, but I think there's a better opportunity. And the opportunity is, how do you use esports as the proverbial Trojan horse to give kids an opportunity to pursue their passion and become marketers and web designers and coders and shoutcasters, and to do all of the sundry items and learn using esports as the vehicle through which they can become thriving, productive individuals in their communities and their society. So we went ahead, and first thing we did was I went to Constance, who some of you probably know, and Kurt, her husband, and to Mimi Ito, and to Katie, all names that you've probably heard over the last 48 hours, and they're all at University of California Irvine. And I said, how do we proceed? We want to be able to try to figure out what to do in this concept. So we put together a community partnership. And what we funded through our foundation was the idea of bringing all stakeholders together to look at how can you use esports as a means and a vehicle to help kids grow and thrive, particularly focused on girls and people of color, so that they have the opportunities that, but for this opportunity, they may not be able to have. So we put this group together, and the first thing we did was we created an advisory board, because this is not about gaming, it's about learning and using a game. So we put together our board, and our board is made up of the chancellor of the UC system, the president emeritus of Chapman College, the dean of the School of Education at Cal State Fullerton, and the superintendent of schools in Orange County Department of Ed, which as a department has 440,000 K-12 kids and 9,800 credentialed teachers. So we thought, this is an education platform. How do we build a curriculum? How do we develop peer mentorship and coaching and use esports to go to where kids are in order to be able to make that happen? So this is the look of what the program is. So we created a mission, and the mission is really very simple. It's how do we go ahead and use the vehicle to impart STEM competencies, the critical thinking, the analytics, the collaboration, all of the things that we know we need for kids to succeed, and use their interest and create, based upon interest-driven learning, an opportunity for these kids to thrive and to grow through the vehicle of what esports is all about. So our mission and narrative is really simple: to provide the opportunities for all students to use esports as a platform to acquire critical communication, collaboration, and problem-solving skills so they can thrive in work and in life. And what we're going to do now is we're going to use this panel, and they're going to talk a little bit about their role and how we launched this in Orange County, and how we use the schools and the systems there, and had the league and had the competition, and how it is now going national. One of the differentiators that you'll hear is that not only is this a learning platform using esports, so we flip the equation a little bit, but this is a program that is available to all high schools around the country free of charge, at no cost, that the foundation is funding to get kids to find their passion points so that they can grow and they can thrive and do the things that need to be able to be done. So I'm going to go ahead and pass this on first to Constance, many of you who you know, who will talk a little bit about what informed us to move forward to be able to do the work and why we went forward to invest in this.
Hi, I'm going to hand the controls to you. So thank you for coming. My name is Constance. I've been studying games for a while. I was here last year. I'm a big Games for Change fan, so shout out to you guys for running a great organization as always. Been studying games for the last 10, 15 years. None of these findings are really terribly unknown to this audience, right? We know the power of games for particular contexts, for particular groups and particular settings. One of the things that's really exciting to me about esports, I've only been studying it for the last year and a half since moving to UCI, which has a collegiate team that just won championship. Just had to mention that. But one of the things that's really exciting about esports for me is that, I've looked at games in a lot of contexts, primarily kids playing commercial games outside of school, and looking at what are some of the intellectual and social and emotional skills, dispositions that are evoked and leveraged in gameplay. But the frame of sports on games is a really interesting one because suddenly it brings into that conversation this sort of aspect of coaching and mentoring, of being a great athlete, meaning like physical health and being able to keep your body in shape, and also notions of sort of emotional resiliency and tilt, which get into things like don't be a jerk online. So for me, esports is this really interesting vehicle for thinking about all of the work we've done in the first generation of Games for Impact, but looking at it in this sort of social frame in which kids are competing, but part of being a great competitor means being someone who is emotionally resilient, someone who can actually work on teams, someone who takes care of their body, someone who understands that you can't play for 12 hours and then expect to be winning championships after your body's exhausted. And a lot of that frame comes from some of the mentoring and the connections with schooling that I would say that we're building into this program. You want to go forward? Oh, where am I now? Oh, sports and learning. So I've spent the last year looking at some of the sports literature, and it was really interesting. How many of you are in sort of the sports scene? So I'm going to feel like I'm going to sound like a neophyte for you. After all of these years of studying cognition and learning, I really hadn't looked at sports and clubs. So as we started talking about what the league should look like, we started doing some landscape work on what do we know about the role of sports and clubs. And of course, the in-shot is that, this is where I'm going to tell you what you already know if you're already in sports psychology, that, in like mid-90s, there was a huge boon of research around the role of sports and clubs, especially in middle and high school, and some college work around what is the relationship between those activities and schooling. And the results are overwhelmingly positive. It turns out that coordinated sports are associated with all of these great things here. So things like fostering a productive mindset toward a growth mindset, what we would now call a growth mindset, connecting kids to school. Mostly the vehicle for that is increasing the number of positive relationships that you have with caring adults through school. And it's associated with things like higher GPA, et cetera. So one of the exciting things about esports is that you have this really interesting intersection with all of this work we can show where games, when they're placed in the right context and with the right sort of social structures around them, can be really productive vehicles, and intersecting it with the sports frame. So that's where we landed on the esports league work. Pass it on.
Adrian. Hi. So just introduce yourself.
Hey guys. So my name's Adrian. I was one of the general managers. Thanks. To the light. So I was a general manager, and so what that meant is I was kind of an advisor to the club or the teams that we had, and we had 28 teams, I believe, or 28 schools, and then 38 teams. So some, like myself, I doubled up. And so step one was starting the league, right? And that was where OCDE came involved. Everybody kind of got involved and started working along those lines. But let me preface this by saying I work at a school that has a large underserved and underrepresented population. And I got to say, games are a great equalizer. When we talk about, getting kids to play big schools, we have a really big private Catholic school, right? Modern Day, if anybody knows. And they were part of the league, right? And so when we mentioned, hey, we're playing modern day, everybody's like, eyes light up like, wow, modern day, like, because traditionally there's this amazing school, right? But our kids were able to compete and actually beat modern day in a match, right? So when I talk about this being a great equalizer, I mean, this is really, really just such important work that's being done. So in terms of the league, right, it's structured really. I'm just taking a poll here. How many are into esports into the room? Okay, so we got a good kind of crowd. Okay, cool. So I'm a big sports guy as well, and so one of the things that really got me fired up about this was we were connected with coaches. The game that we were playing was actually called League of Legends, and I'm not a huge league player, but those of you who are looking to implement this, your teachers, your advisors, your GMs don't have to be, right? We provide all the elements and the training and material that you will need to make this successful. So I really encourage you guys to reach out and connect because we have so much valuable material for you guys. But just to give you like a brief overview, right? We held tryouts, right? Like anybody else would. I sat down with the coaches. We watched film, right? Kids submitted their replays, and even when we got into competition, kids would meet during practice. They'll have an hour or two practice sessions with the coaches. We had teams, and like Constance and Gerald were mentioning, this is such a cool initiative because it gets so many people involved, right? It gets so many people involved that wouldn't otherwise have anything else to say. League is played, it's a 5v5 game, right? But then you wonder about, okay, so you have 30, 40, 50 people that are in the club. What are they doing, right? Well, they can take stats. They can do data analysis. They can be your shoutcasters. They can do, they can program your website. They can, be part of your social media platform team, right? There's just so much you can involve in this, right? And then there's, my kids, for example, some of the anecdotal data, right, is, we have kids that are so fired up about writing fan fiction, right? Kids that aren't even interested in English, right? They can care less about reading 7th century poetry. But when you talk about fan fiction for games, like, they get fired up. They're like, okay, I can write something for you. And, and so part of which we'll talk a little bit about later with the curriculum and all that, it's like getting, having that interest that's super, super, like it's driving what we're doing here. And one of the big components is the club. And so, there's a ton of material on that as well. We can provide constitutions and bylaws if you need that, just to kind of get it going. Let me check my notes. Is there a video, Gerald, that we were gonna?
There will be. Here's the schedule on how the first year went. And this moves so fast. I mean,
it's cool that you guys are all here because you guys, the writing's already on the wall, right? I was talking to our superintendent, and we're talking about all this cool work that we're doing, and his first question to me was, how do we convince the rest? All right, and my response is, you don't have to, right? The writing's on the wall, it's happening. You either come with us or you're being left by the wayside, right? Like, this is happening. So it's an amazing initiative that's happening here. And I'll be happy if you have questions about any of the logistics of the league or how to get your teachers or advisors or your GMs involved. We can certainly chat. But here's a little recap, I imagine. I think this was the championship event.
The Orange County High School Esports League is connecting play and learning, sports and education to help kids grow, thrive, and be the best they could be.
Games are really challenging and demanding. They require complex problem solving. You have this whole ecosystem around it that has all the benefits of sports, plus the connection to technology, which brings in STEM.
Approximately 91% of our K-12 education has an interest in video games. What does that tell you? The power of these games and the power of online learning, in fact. You have communication, collaboration, all the things that are necessary in the world of work. Character is really foundational, I believe, to what we're doing today.
This is it. This is what it's all about.
Huge event. It's an esports arena nearby in Orange County, and it's just massive and it's growing. And if you ever Googled like an esports arena or a finals event, right, there's 40,000 people that fill the arena. There's another 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 million streaming on Twitch and YouTube and all of that. So it's certainly big. So and I gotta say, like being there on the front line with the kids. I've been in education now 10 years almost. And I teach a very high interest. I do broadcast journalism and content creation, and kids love that, right? But when we mentioned we were doing esports, I mean, that was like a next level of excitement and energy and enthusiasm. So, and the bond these kids created in the short time. We did it for like 3 months, I think, the whole league. And, the bond they created, they're going out, Korean barbecue is huge in SoCal, and going out for boba, right? I'm sure there's quite a few. And so the kids would meet up, they would go out. And, these were kids that normally wouldn't talk, but, the league is what kind of brought them together. Not so much the games, right? Because yes, it was League of Legends, but it was just the whole community of these kids coming together and saying, hey, this is our shared interest. We have a shared purpose of getting these 5 guys to try to compete and win this championship. So it was everybody around them that was helping tell that story and that narrative. And that was just so cool to watch. As an educator, like that's really, I think, what all this is all about. And so it was really cool.
All right. And my name is Tom Turner. I'm Director of Instruction at the Orange County Department of Ed. And I was at the table a year ago when we first had this meeting to try to figure out what we want to do. And phase 1 was to start a league. And we did that in about a month or 2, which is crazy. But we recruited and went out to these schools and said, hey, do you guys under the banner of your high school want to have a team for esports? And the looks we got. You can't imagine what we had to do to try to recruit. But of course, it catches fire because it's a great project when the kids are on board, but the adults are not. They get it. We have to have it explained to us why this is going to work. But it did, and we had this great league. But all along, as we're running this league and we are getting people to sign up, and kids are getting excited, and we're getting all these great stories of people being involved, I kept saying, well, what about the curriculum? That's my job. What about the curriculum? What are we going to do with the curriculum? And I would drag Constance into these meetings, and what about the curriculum? And we finally sat down and tried to hash out what this was going to look like. We had these propositions that were kind of drove what we wanted to do about engaging students where they are. Everybody's playing, so why would we not try to engage them, especially those who might not find school interesting? Anybody met a high school kid like that? Who then goes home and games and they find that really interesting? And then try to get that affiliation with school to think that they can be successful in school where they might not think they can be successful. That was a good one. And then trying to find that connection with learning. Now, as Gerald said, the esports was the vehicle for learning. It wasn't the learning itself, but that's what we were trying to get them to do. And then give them some of those STEM, SEL type of skills that were going to make them feel marketable for something. So when we finally sat down and said, what are we going to do for a curriculum? We thought, wow, can we run this as a math class? Can we run this as a science class? Those are STEM, right? But in the end, we did the obvious, which is we built English courses out of them. Exactly. That's exactly what I said when Constance brought it up. So we built a 4-year series of courses that will replace high school English. And we structured them like this. We talked about all of the ecosystem of work that surrounds esports. And Constance, you gave some weird stat about the number of people who supported one NBA player on a team. It was like 91 people around the organization. And these are all the people in the organization around esports. We hear about the player, we hear about how much the pro can make, but in reality, it's all of the people around it. That's where the job opportunities are. So we broke them up into these sectors. These are the career technical ed sectors. That's the term we use out in California. But you can see how you can look at the strategists, the content creators, the entrepreneurs, the organizers of events. And then we organized 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade curriculum around this English language arts curriculum. And what we have to do in California to get something approved, because students don't want to take a course that they don't get credit for to be eligible for college, is we had to get that approved through the University of California Office of the President, which we have 11th grade approved, and we should have the rest of them approved. We have this now, and each course then not only contains the content standards for English language arts, but also we're highlighting NGSS standards, ISTE tech standards, the social emotional learning components of it, as well as the CTE, the career technical ed pieces. So all of those are highlighted in each course. And then we went out and shopped these to our local districts, and we are piloting the curriculum this fall, which, if you know anything about the way high school runs, to say in a short period of time, you are going to pilot this and you're going to redo your master schedule, and you're going to tell that poor assistant principal who put the whole thing together that you need to move this section and this teacher over here. And then these kids that all were part of this 9th grade English are really going to come over here. That was a big ask. And we have a lot of schools then who are interested more logically to implement this in the fall of 2019. And we'll build a PLC around that to let them kind of get up to speed about what that might look like. And we are, once it's approved, it's available for everyone. As Gerald said, the idea of a free education is really what this is, and I'm a public educator, so everything we do will be made available for everyone's use. And this is what it looks like as far as breaking out one unit of the curriculum and then calling out the standards for each one of those. I think this is 9th grade, 10th grade. Yeah. Yeah, and I do need to thank Adrian was part of the crowd of teachers who came and helped us write this. It wasn't me sitting there, as you can imagine, writing 4 years of ELA content, but it was a bunch of, we had teachers who were 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade teachers, experts in the career technical ed sector, and then those who can help create our content. We all sat through a long weekend of this and then have been iterating on it for the last 3 months. And this is a sample of what the different units and the key assignments are for the 9th grade curriculum. Yeah. And then the great thing about this is we start to talk to the districts, as you can also imagine. Everybody has a pet project. They have a coding academy at their school. They have a cybersecurity program. They have content creators, game developers, like a CTE course, a pathway on campus. They've been asking if it's flexible enough to add all of these things onto this existing curriculum. And the answer is yes, to make it flexible enough, because every school has their thing, and we just want to make it work for those teachers.
And during this process, we had Constance and her team at UCI do a formative and programmatic evaluation and assessment real time as we go through that. And Constance will share a little bit about her findings from the first year of the program.
So my team, first I just want to say, so I've been in California a year and a half, and the idea of putting a 4-year English college-bound curriculum on esports in a public high school district is totally effing radical where I'm from. So I just want to say, I feel like I just want to say thanks to all the radicals who I'm sitting up here with, because it's super amazing to work with these people. And the teachers who are willing to do this, and all the leadership and administration that's willing to let us do this, right? I could never have pulled this off in the Midwest. I'm just saying. So whoever can do that, please come talk to me so I can talk to you about how to... But my team, our research lab was really around just sort of thinking about walking through the initial research to make sure that we were on firm ground about what do we know about games and sports, how do we move forward. But then our next task was really looking through sort of doing a formative evaluation. This was our first alpha year. We launched in January and had a championship event by April. So it was like in double the speed of what would be a normal league. And so we really just wanted to do this really like kind of alpha, first run, first playable version of the league. And our team was really there to do formative evaluation, meaning that we were there. I think Katie Salen has talked about this here at this event, but really trying to work with the people designing it to give them in real time feedback about what was happening. One thing that we really wanted to pay attention to was not trying to colonize the play space and the passion area of kids, but instead trying to understand, like, where does it authentically really connect to school? Something that's really important. Again, what you've said before, I've spent over a decade of my life dealing with the kids that hate school, even if they're doing well in school, hate school, love games. And the idea was to really try to do this radical act of connecting something they love, proving to them that the school standards, that the stuff you learn in school is actually deeply connected to the play spaces that you love most. That's the proposition. So we did a formative evaluation. You see some of the research questionnaires. So we did a ton of interviews. We watched, we did field notes, we did all of the classic work. But one thing we wanted to document was not just what's working and what's not working, but what are sort of the legitimate, authentic, and sometimes really spontaneous activities that pop up that are deeply tied to academic stuff we care about in school, regardless of discipline. And it was really surprising, actually. So, a couple slides back, you see like 4 or 5 different standards. We went from focusing on STEM to focusing on STEM and English language arts because teams and communications were so strong. Then we had to add ISTE standards because the tech stuff was off the hook. Then we also had to add the CTE work because when we talk about esports, we're not just talking about the kids who are good enough to play on your competitive team. We have the competing league, but if you're in esports, you know that in esports, everyone, your spectators are playing the game. The line between the players and the viewers and the other participants is a very porous, thin line. So when we talk about esports, we don't just mean the kids that are competing today in this league right now this week. We're talking about them plus all of the ecosystem around them, right? They're a big club. So we have competing teams with clubs around them. And then in addition, we're designing this high school course to even build it out further. Though all of it, you can take all of it, you can take none of it, whichever part, right? It's meant to be adapted to what people love. But I will say, I have to say, like in the very first, this is first out of the gate, before we even start tinkering or trying to amp up certain academic qualities here, we saw some really amazing work. So I've just pulled some. I was only allowed 2 slides, even though I like to talk so much. But, we saw a ton of work around STEM problem solving, argument, the use of data. If you know something like League, the idea of using data to improve your play is par for the course. So we work with folks like Mobalytics and other entities that actually help create data visualizations. We saw a bunch of really spontaneous club activities that the GMs, just by being awesome teachers who knew nothing about esports, were like, you know what you need to do? You need to make some movies about your team, some sizzle reel, and get them online so you can make your team seem cooler than your rival team. How about this? How about we fundraise for, one of them was fundraising around trying to figure out if you can come up with enough money to have cool jerseys by the time you go to compete in the championship event. So this was all like work, labor of love. And it's interesting, back in the day, I got into games because I was a guild leader. I'm that old. And one of the things so I ran a guild for 3.5 years. I happened to we conquered 6 of 7 castles in Legends of Aiden. I'm just saying, bragging points. Just gonna say. But that activity, there is so much work that went into that game that was so beyond what was happening on the screen, right? Like you've got all of this other teamwork happening, and it's that ecosystem, the para data, the para activity. So what we saw spontaneously emerge with the help of teachers was pretty amazing. I'm not sure, let's go to the next slide. I'm not sure we included the SEL stuff. Yes, we did. One of the things that was so interesting to me, so yes, we have lots of academic content, and I can point you to annotated versions of all of our data showing which standards we hit across, the STEM Next Gen Science standards, English Language Arts standards, ISTE Tech standards. What was the 4th one we added? I can't think of it. SEL was our last one. This is the one that actually surprised me the most. And what surprised me was that we have virtual coaches that are given training about how to deal with conflict, how to be awesome with middle and high school kids, how to be a great near peer. So we did that work through Connected Camps. That's the entity that Mimi and Katie work on. And then we had GNs on the ground floor, right? So the teachers who may not know anything about the game, but they definitely know kids. And at the end of this, interviewing the kids about what they got out of it, I can show you the academic stuff, but it was that social emotional side that was really riveting. We had kids that personally articulated some of these outrageous quotes up here, right? Like talking about how they would get themselves really worked up and having to step back and manage their own feelings as a good for the team, figuring out how it is that they needed to manage in League. We refer to it as tilt, and doing a lot of sort of emotional conflict work, not as something separate or something that we had to walk over and tell them how to do, but because it would be great for their team and great for their competitions. So it's just this natural part of the ecosystem. And I think that was the thing that struck me most. 2 things. One, that so much of that work was happening. And 2, that students really wanted to talk about it. They really wanted to talk about how to be in these kind of spaces. Does anyone, people who play League, if you play it long enough, inevitably you run in, or is it only because I'm female, you run into like some of the nastiest sides of what could be said in text in humanity ever. And we ran into kids who really were welcoming that conversation about emotional regulation and about communication and about how to be a better gamer. So that was the part that for me was the most shocking and enduring, was the fact that kids This wasn't a space in which we had to mandate to them to not be toxic. This was a space in which they actually actively wanted to have that conversation and were working it out with near peers that didn't feel like they were me as a mom wagging a finger saying, don't be a jerk. But instead were coaches saying, man, if you play this way, you are never going to win. This isn't how you win. And when you win, just act like you've been there before. Know what to say, right? Know how to lose well. Know how to win well. And that, I think, was some of the most surprising data that we had. So the academic stuff is great, but it was the social emotional side and the fact that kids were so hungry for that conversation that I found to be really exciting.
So you've heard a little bit about the various components and pieces. So let me kind of wrap it up for us because we're not given a whole lot of time. As you can see, we really prepared a lot for this. Forgive us. There are really 5 C's to what we're talking about: competition, clubs, coaching, curriculum, and careers. And if you think about what this is, I'll try to give a quick summary on what it is. One, it's about the competition. It's about the league and what it is to play and to engage and get kids passionate about what they do. The club is at the core. It's how do you go ahead and gather people through a school or not a school environment, an after-school program, a Boys or Girls Club, wherever it may be, and be able to impart to them through a general manager, a GM, who's an educator, paraprofessional with an out-of-school program, or a teacher in school, who does exactly what Constance talked about to become the right guide for their evolution, their maturity, and their learning. Then you have the coach. Every one of our coaches was virtual. Our coaches came from Taiwan, Singapore, South Africa, France, all over the world, because they had the technical expertise. And if we're really going to talk about what esports is and the use of technology, then the utilization of coaches virtually really made a whole lot of sense. So we had workshops every week on how do you take the game and break down the game into specific slides and look at the physics behind the game. Where do I position my players? What are the mathematical pieces around what this looks like? How do we communicate amongst each other in order to optimize our ability to play the game well? And then how do we go ahead and build out cheerleader sections? How do we build out the fundraising pieces? How do we build out the marketing pieces? How do we go ahead and build our own websites so people can get to know who we are and what we are and the competition around all that is? The club, the coaching, the mentorship, and the GM pieces are the core pieces of what this is. And it was developed by educators. We paid for 17 teachers over 4 months to sit down and write all of this up. And for those of you who are anywhere and everywhere that you want, who want to be part of this, one, there's no cost to you. Second, we have created toolkits. How to. How do you be a GM? How do you be a coach? How do you set up the team? What does it look like? If you want to adopt the 4-year curriculum, feel free to do so. If you want to only take units of that and incorporate that into what you're doing, that's fine. It is malleable and flexible enough to meet the specific needs of what your high school program is. You could take one unit or you could take all the units, and you could do what California is doing, which is to actually adopt it into the school system, where you can go through under the A to G requirements in California and take this for 4 years if you wanted to and be able to meet all the English requirements for matriculation from high school to get into a UC or a Cal State school for what that is. And then you get into the career piece, and that to us is really important. And that gets back to the statement that I made originally, and that is that it is a shame that kids are often defined, or their future is often defined by the zip code they're born into. And the only way they get out of that is by good health and good education. So our foundation invests in both. This is an example of where we invest within the education piece. So we went to UCI, to public schools, to the superintendent and the school district, and we said, help create a place where kids are, where we can go and find their passion, create this club dynamic where kids who normally will sit in their rooms at home at the end of a day and put headphones on and play for 3-4 hours and not get involved in the social emotional components or the learning pieces of what that is, and engage them in a way where they see the value of learning through play and through their passion in what it is that they do. And then as part of that, what we do in addition to the curriculum is we created an entire year-long set of workshops. What does it mean to be a healthy gamer? And we spend 3 to 4 hours on one day teaching people that if you really want to be a great gamer, then you really have to think about nutrition and health and screen time and everything else. And what does that mean? And how do you monitor it? And what does that look like? What's the physics behind the game? What are the job opportunities, the career opportunities around the game itself? I may not want to play the game, but I love marketing. And I think esports is cool. How can I use that and put it together to be able to do it? And then how can I go ahead through the mentorship of peer-to-peer learning and through the GM and the teacher and actually move my marketing skills forward to be able to help my team, be a cheerleader for my team, and build my career opportunities in my own portfolio on who I am as a human being so that when I want to apply to college, or if I don't, and I just want to be credentialed or go out into the marketplace, I now have a set of demonstrable skills that I can go ahead and show that I can do these various things for these various organizations wherever I might want to be. So the 5 pieces that differentiate us is really around the competition and how we operate, the club, the coach, the curriculum, which is the only state certified curriculum for 4 years around esports in the country, and the concept of career. And the other differentiator is this is free to kids because education should be free. Everyone should be entitled to a free education where they can grow and they can thrive. So what we'll do is we'll leave you with really kind of a call to action. And the call to action is if you went to esportsfed.org, there's a sign-up sheet to create if you wanted just a letter of interest. Go to esportsfed.org and just say, I'm interested, I want to know more. I want to become more engaged. We will then communicate with you, help you set up and structure anything from leagues to just clubs within your local schools. And we are creating this platform around the country for schools and out-of-school programs to be able to adopt and utilize to meet the goals and aspirations of what it is that we're talking about. So we have about 7 minutes left. We wanted to be able to really leave some time for you to ask questions. We've got some incredibly learned people here in the field and in education who can answer your questions. So please, the floor is open. Ask whatever you'd like. Yes, ma'am.
You said you recruited students in some public schools. Did you recruit for gender balance, or was it self-selected?
It was self-selected. We talked early about requiring a gender balance, but we decided, especially in our first year, just to get our foot in the door, just to put out the game and have schools decide what that team might look like.
So my follow-up is what ended up happening?
Well, because we chose League of Legends, I can tell you it was mostly boys who played the game. It was mostly Asian and white boys participating in the game, competing. We intentionally are looking forward then to a different game in the fall, which will hopefully attract a different demographic. We're learning that these games do attract a demographic type of player as we go through. Some of the summer camps at UCI, I don't want to speak for them, but we are purposely targeting girls playing esports, as well as some of our underrepresented minorities, like Anaheim Union, participating in some of our esports camps and try to get some interest with them as well, but also targeting those districts specifically to try to get them involved as well.
And the other piece is, just to elaborate on that, is we purposefully go to schools and say, you don't have to be an esports advocate or engage in esports to be part of the club. If you're a marketer or a creator, if you're into the arts, if you're into other components around what the ecosystem of esports in the industry can be like, join this club and develop your skills around what that is. And we think that that's a huge draw for a diversity of people to participate and hone their skills.
Do you have to have a team to run the curriculum? Could you adopt a team that isn't in your own school?
That's a good question. We've not addressed that. Thank you for asking.
Yes.
Yes. Well, I don't know. We're figuring this out. Yes. Yes, and I know you, so we just find a way to make that work, right? I mean, yes.
I think the curriculum could be a near to adopt, where the team and the actual that part of it could be the next. So for some, it might be take up the curriculum with a team you've adopted.
Yeah.
Not internal.
Well, you had.
I don't see why not. I don't see why not. I mean,
build the internal team.
yeah. I mean, what the kids get around that is the same. Doesn't matter where the team is. It can be half across the world for that matter, right? But they're all in it for one thing, right? And so in the end,
The curriculum
absolutely.
will happen during school in the team, but
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. This is all. Yeah, this is all. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I'm really curious about how you guys in California, I'm from Nevada, how in California, I mean, kind of similar ways in which the state runs the like curriculum and licensing a little bit. How do you guys for teaching this course inside of school? What are the teachers that are GMing, I'm assuming, what are they credentialed in?
So they're English courses. Yeah, they're English courses. So they would need an ELA credential.
Could they possibly involve the ELA?
But GMs could be anybody.
Yeah.
Teacher. In fact, we have lots of teachers who knew nothing about esports, but the students were like, we want to have a club, we need a teacher, will you be our faculty sponsor? Here's what they know kids. They know how to interact with kids and be like, man, let's make this a positive space. So we actually had a huge diversity.
Yeah. Yeah, and some knew the game, some didn't, so it was a good mix in that as well. And so that kind of brought a lot of, a good mix of knowledge as far as the GMs. So it was a really cool, yeah. But for the curriculum, the curriculum itself would have to be English. But yeah, it could certainly be adopted. Yeah, I can certainly, the framework is there. Yeah, totally.
Yes, so my question is a follow-up on hers, which is you said that you started with League, but you try some different alternatives to League. Is the idea to iterate until you set upon one that attracts a diverse set of students, or is it to support both League and Dota and other things so that you have a diversity of options that might be attractive to different student bodies?
So you just landed on one of the hardest nuts to crack, right? So we launched, I'm going to be blunt. We launched with League because if we wanted students to take us seriously, that we knew our stuff, League is the obvious choice because it's still the dominant title. So we launched with that, knowing full well that we were risking okay, so how are we going to make that work? By the way, it's like the dirty little unspoken secret in esports that while there may not be women on the competitive rosters, that ecosystem is full of women organizing stuff who get absolutely no credit whatsoever for all the stuff they're doing. So part of the ecosystem was to say, okay, can we actually cast a broader net so we can actually show that if you look at the cosplay scene, marketing scene, all right, so anyway, I'll get off that soapbox. This is really tricky, right? Because we have this conversation regularly. We haven't announced what games we're doing. We're having a big conversation about what we can get away with in schools, right? Because I'm really pushing for Fortnite, but boy, is that a trigger for many people. Because on the one hand, I don't think it's legitimate to tell girls that they're supposed to like a kind of game that they don't want to play. As a female, I'm like, no, thank you. I don't need to play what the boys play. I can play what I want to play myself. On the other hand, you're also trying to balance it out, right? So as you know, different demographics, different ages, and different genders like different titles. So trying to figure out how you can build a league system, especially at the national level, that can be inclusive. We're figuring out, does that mean we need to be inclusive in the kinds of games that we're playing? Does it mean that we need to play multiple titles at once, or can we rotate enough through the year and through subsequent years to bring more people in? I also think it's a matter of the first year out the gate was a great success, but how many of those kids show up next term when we might flip the games around? Because no one's done this before. So are only league players going to be in the club and then league players leave when it's going to go to something like, a racer game? I don't know. We're going to find that out.
And there's a continuity risk, right, too, because if they start along this curricular path and then they get turned off because you switch from to StarCraft or whatever it is,
right.
Then...
Well, the curriculum, you can take it one year and not the others. It doesn't have to stack. You don't have to take 9th to take 10th. You don't have to take 10th. That you can come and go as you please. But I think the art of this is going to be figuring out, I like to think of it as levers and dials, figuring out how it is that you can make sure and engage, I have at least 2 titles in mind that bring in a lot more ethnic diversity. So how do you figure out how to build league structures that can be more inclusive through the choices that you make? One thing that was really interesting the first year, which granted we did this in 4 months. It was a 4-month just sprint. But one thing that was really interesting is that the first month we were panicked. We were like, oh my God, all we've got is white Asian males. Oh, what are we going to do? Which, no offense, white Asian males, that's okay. I like you too. But we're, And then what we started seeing was that people started grabbing friends and friends of friends, and suddenly we had clubs before we even announced clubs. So trying to figure out how to build that ecosystem in a way that brings in the diversity is super important. One thing I will tell you, which is the longer play, which is not Samueli's agenda, but is my own personal agenda, is that I think the only way we're going to change the conversation post-Gamergate around games is to literally raise new gamers. And so for me, women aren't in that space because that space looks pretty toxic. So I don't know that, it's hard enough playing with a handle that's a female name, let alone streaming and being a celebrity in that space. And these team players have become celebrities, right? Like at the height they are. So my own personal interest is that let's actually create an overall better gamer and a better game community in some fashion. And part of that means not firewalling it out. It means getting up in the business of legitimizing their interest and putting, it doesn't have to be pedantic, but putting some caring adults in that space that can just nudge and shape them toward better ways to be online so that, when my kids grow up, I don't have to worry about the crap that's going to be said to them when they're on chat channels or Discord and, playing Voice on League. So it's a long-term answer, not satisfying. I'm sorry.
Part of what you're hearing is how we are, to some degree, building the plane as we're flying it. Yeah. So think of it, this is an analogy I use with some people. Think about it as car buffs. I love, for example, Porsches. Someone else may like Chevy, someone else may like Mustangs, but we all like cars. So how can we educate ourselves and learn and better perform within the car of our love and then use those skills after the fact? Whether you're going to be an NFL player, an NBA player, an esports player, or whatever, you have a limited life in what you do. What are you going to learn through that process that will allow you to thrive and be a productive individual, raise a good family, earn a good living, and have the kind of life that you want to be able to have for yourself and your loved ones? That's the core of what this is. Esports is a wonderful vehicle. You know the data better than I. You know how many people play, what it's going to look like, what the revenue looks like. And it's not about exploiting human capital for personal capitalistic gain. Granted, that's fine. People want to make money, let them make money. But for us, it's the core of how do we help children? And what do we do to help kids? And how can esports be the vehicle to be able to make all that happen? So our time is up. I apologize. I really want to be cognizant of what the direction is on what we can do. We're here to answer questions if you have any. And please, it's esportsfed.org. If you have any interest, let us know. We're here to help you. Thank you very much.